All right. All right. I figured today this is a special show. And I normally would say, hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Real Talk. Not somber, but this is National Police Officers Week nationally, which is held every year in Washington, D.C. I haven't had the opportunity to go yet, but I keep saying I'm going to go. I have friends that had opportunity to go. Met some buddies on Facebook who said that they were there and enjoying it. So I'm jealous, but I'm going to go. Of course, that is the most famous bagpipe law enforcement in honor of the fallen and memories of law enforcement officers that you will hear. Typically, you also hear it at a funeral. This is not a funeral setting, neither are we trying to make it that way, but we do want to pay homage to those who have tragically lost their lives, and that's something that they do down or over in D.C. during the National Police Week. It's not all somber. There's a lot of things going on, but that is a moment that they take very seriously, and we do here on Real Talk as well. I want to say this to you. If you have not had the opportunity in our last episode to go back and listen to that, I realized that, and please, ladies, don't judge me what I'm about to tell you. I realized I haven't had many women on the show. And so Greta, she was the first, Chopra, she was the first one on the show who was a woman, a real woman on the show, believe it or not. I haven't had any trans women either. I'm just saying that. She was the first woman I had on the show. And today I have two more women because we do still want to carry on that trend. And the last episode of season 5, episode 2, was titled Women Who Have Strong Voices. So I thought it'd be fitting to bring on not only a former police officer, but who also has a strong organization that she co-founded here in North Carolina. And we're all aware we're going to hear from her again. You've seen it before on the show, but today we're going to be diving deep into what she does, why she supported. And then I have another wonderful lady on with me today, and her name is Alexandra Levine. And of course, at the bottom, you'll see Lindsay LiCausi. That I said, Lindsay, we're very good friends and sisters. Always jack it up. I know I said it wrong.
No, it's okay. LiCausi.
No,
You're close.
LiCausi. One of these days, I'm going to call Lindsay and say, Lindsay, LiCausi, listen to me. But we have Alexandra Levine on, and these are two women, different states, who are supporting law enforcement, who stand by, who backs the blue. So I thought it would be befitting to have a show today entitled Women Who Support Law Enforcement. And these two women have been chosen. How are you wonderful ladies doing today?
Doing good. Nice to see you again.
Very good.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to see you again. And also, Levine, it is wonderful to actually meet in person, virtually. And I hope someday we can, all three of us can connect. Both organizations just can do great things. That is my whole idea for you two women also for coming on the show, to be able to network and connect. So I'm looking forward to that later on in the show. But I would like it, Lindsay, if you can tell the listeners of Real Talk podcast who you are. You did serve some time in law enforcement, so I want to give you that moment to talk about that briefly if you like, and then tell us what state you're in. I already gave it away, but do that for us and your organization, and then I'll move over to wonderful Levine, and we'll do the same for you, Levine, what state you're in, what motivates you, and then we'll go into these wonderful questions that we have. Take it away, Lindsay.
Thank you. So I am currently in North Carolina, but I am originally from Maryland. I did serve in law enforcement with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. Served as a road deputy for a few months, and then went into sex crimes and child abuse as a detective, and worked there for a few years before I decided to move down here to North Carolina and start my own family.
That's a beautiful thing. We're so glad that we was able to steal you and your husband, because y'all are great people. I love you all. Y'all are just wonderful. And of course, to the other members of Back the Blue, we have to give a shout out to Gotti and Tammy, and I forget the brother's name. He came by way of California. What's his name again, Lindsay?
Oh, Gary.
Gary, we'll give you a shout out as well. Good to see you. And of course, to the husband, Lindsay, we say what's up to you, brother. So, and to the kids.
Thank you.
Levine, absolutely. Levine, your
Awesome.
turn. You have the, as we say, you have the mic.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be on here with you, Lindsay. I'm not in law enforcement, but my uncle was actually chief of police in Montgomery County for 35 years. I am currently working in Maryland, but I was actually born and raised in Florida. I'm still currently a permanent resident of the state of Florida. So Governor Ron DeSantis governor. But I go back and forth a lot between Florida and the Maryland area. But law enforcement has always been a part of me because of my uncle and because of other family members of mine that were in law enforcement. In July 2020, I got involved with the organization We Back Blue, which is a nationwide organization that supports the police and memorializes the fallen. Our founder, Melissa Roby, put that entire organization together, and she does rallies and events all over the nation. And maybe she's done one in North Carolina. And I know we talked about possibly us collaborating together, which would be really nice.
That would be wonderful. Yes.
Really good. And another nonprofit that I just started working with is called LEAD, L-E-A-D. It stands for Law Enforcement Against Drugs. It specifically combats the fentanyl crisis that's happening in our nation. Unfortunately, 300 kids a day kill themselves due to fentanyl and narcotics. That is close to 100,000 kids a year. It's very bad. It also helps with our homeless veterans, provides them shelters, provides them homeless veterans kits, and also gets them back on their feet. It also combats the sex trafficking, the human trafficking, the child trafficking, and also combats cyberbullying. And that's also organization. So all these things, that we're doing, they really help. We just need, more support. We need more people involved because these are things that are real and we need to call them out and we need to be a part of that.
I totally agree. And audience, if you're listening or you're watching, you see why these wonderful women are chosen. They are movers and shakers in not only the law enforcement community, but in your communities. And I do believe that once this show is over and Lindsay and Levine, Alexandra have connected, they're going to be doing some great things together. I do hope, and absolutely, I'm sure I'll be a part of those things. But I look forward to the future. Now, side note about two of these wonderful women. Lindsay does not sing, however, Levine does. She does a beautiful national anthem. So if you're looking for someone at any law enforcement event, Lindsay says she doesn't sing, but she could hold the mic for Levine. That's like
I could do that. Yeah.
See that? But I do believe, Lindsay, you do sing. It's just not where you want people to hear. I'm sure if you're feeling the groove, you are singing somewhere in that house.
In the car or the house, yes.
See? All you have to do is put it on record, let the world listen to it. That's what you got to do.
No.
Well, it's good to have other talents, and you women are doing great in your organization, and I'm glad to be a part of your friendship. So we'll have an opportunity to share more about what you all are doing, especially Lindsay, when it comes to you and the wonderful folks at Back the Blue NC. So what I want to do is start off by asking this amazing question, but it's a true question. What motivates you two women to support the law enforcement community? What gives you the drive? Why do you do it? I kind of have an idea. Of course, Lindsay, you served. Alexandra, your dad was a police chief, so it's embedded in both of you. Your uncle. I'm sorry. Your uncle. See, I made your dad the police chief and uncle.
It's okay.
So it's in your blood. It's in the family. It runs in the family.
Mm-hmm.
If I can start with you this time, Alexandra, and tell us what, besides those deals that I just mentioned, what motivates you to support our community?
One of the things is because of my family, but also, growing up, I used to think the police, and I still feel this way, that they're like the coolest people in the world. They're wearing uniforms. They're saving people's lives. I used to love the firefighters, the first responders. They're going up there. They're climbing that tree. They're getting that cat. I just thought it was like the coolest in the world. And also, I go to churches, I go to synagogues, I go to different places of worship. I love seeing law enforcement there. I love knowing that I'm being protected, that I'm going into a place of worship and I don't have to worry because there's police protection there. I've actually been a big advocate for pushing for more law enforcement at religious institutions because we need it, especially in areas of high crime. I love what police officers do, what they stand for, the oath that they take. They put on that uniform. It's not mandated. They sacrifice their lives. They know they may or may not come back when they leave their homes, but they're doing something. They're doing it such a good deed for this nation that we need people to really say thank you to them and to really honor them for the service that they do.
Thank you so much. That's powerful. Lindsay,
Yeah,
what motivates you?
Obviously, my background in law enforcement definitely motivates me because I've walked in the shoes of a police officer for a few years. And I know now, as a former police officer and a mother, just how important it is to keep our community safe. I want to make sure that my children are growing up in a safe, protected community. And even though I may not serve at the moment because I take care of my children, I still have the heart of a servant, and I still appreciate and honor those that serve around me. And that is a big reason why I started Back the Blue NC, was to honor and support the men and women in law enforcement who go out there and they risk their lives every day for us civilians.
And let me tell you, you do it well. You and the team, y'all do it well. You sacrifice a whole lot, and you have done so much. I can't wait to get into the moment where we get to share and brag on you, how you have supported the Raleigh police officer's wife, even though, he's not here, supported his wife and daughter. Y'all are still doing great things. And that bill that y'all have been a part of to help see make it through the House, I believe it went through the Senate, but we'll go and talk about it a little bit soon. But both of you wonderful women are doing amazing things in law enforcement to support us. And we, on behalf of the community, we appreciate that. Now, what are your thoughts on the way policing in America is going today? Now, I want to hear about the pros and the cons. And as you know, on this show, Real Talk, we'll never defund the police. We'll always support the police. However, I always say this, we're going to talk about the good and the bad of policing. When officers wrong, we got to talk about it. When they're right, we're going to do what? We're going to praise them. But we cannot be what we call hypocrites. And neither one of us here on this wonderful outlet are hypocrites. So, Lindsay, what motivates you? What are your thoughts on the way policing is in America in 2023?
Some of the pros that I see are the commitment to transparency. So you see now officers, they have body cams, they have dash cams, you have cameras all around businesses and highways. So that way, in case anything comes into question, a situation between an officer and a civilian that may come into question, that is now completely transparent for the most part to the public. Back when I served, I didn't have a dash cam or a body cam. I could have easily been accused of something, or I easily could have accused somebody of something that was false. But now with the body cams and the dash cams, we are able to take a good, hard look at what really happened and see in that moment before we go judging based on, our feelings towards the officer or towards the suspect. And also, unfortunately, the other con that I do see, one of the cons that I do see is a lack of budget right now for trying to hire and retain quality police officers. I have seen standards lowered just to get bodies in the door, but that does not help our cause for creating a very strong, reputable, trustworthy force that needs to be on our streets. And I know that if we can lock down on those requirements for our police officers and for their backgrounds, as well as maybe offer additional incentive to apply and stay in the career of law enforcement, that would definitely help.
I agree with that. You see a lot what's going on. You said it, you hit on the nail where they're lowering the standards. I heard a couple of officers from a certain agency say that. They said, well, look, at the end of the day, this officer who's coming aboard, more just of a body that we need because we're so low. But those days have come and gone where, they really took the law enforcement recruitment very seriously, got the best of the best. And unfortunately, like you said, we're unable at this point to really do that because so many people have left and trying to still leave. And what do you have? And especially when you hear about the media, how we're getting slandered 24/7. Nobody wants to risk their life for the amount of money we make. Go into the scrutiny of the body cameras and courts, and hopefully, unfortunately, one day possibly be sued. We know we don't like all those things, but yet the people that are still here and serving like myself, we look past that because we realize this is our profession, and the only way to pick it up is to save it. And so I'm one of those guys. So I like what you said, Levine. How about you?
I would say the pros with the police departments and the police force is they're actually going more into schools and educating people on law enforcement. The nonprofit organization I talked about, LEAD, we actually train law enforcement responders and firefighters on the programs so that they can go into schools and educate the young people on, the badness of taking narcotics and fentanyl and so forth. And I think that's really important. Back in the day, they had a program called DARE, if you guys have ever heard of DARE.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so LEAD is kind of the sequel to DARE. So DARE was a very good program and it did very well. And now what LEAD does is it takes that a step further. Now we're going into the drugs. Now we're going to the narcotics. Now we're actually providing free mental health services to kids and families. And law enforcement is coming in and kind of being that mental health person to like talk to the child and, educate the child on narcotics and talk to the families as well. So that's a really good pro that law enforcement is getting more involved in schools. Say the con is that a lot of lawmakers, mayors, county executives, they're not allowing their county sheriffs or they're not allowing the police department in general to actually do their jobs. And a lot of politics is getting involved in that. In Baltimore City, or actually, excuse me, in Baltimore County, for example, they actually just recently got rid of their chief of police, Melissa Hyatt, because she really didn't combat the crime. She just really didn't crack down on it. And they fired her because of pressure from the Fraternal Order of Police. They got a new chief of police who's been in Baltimore County for 36 years in law enforcement. And they're hoping that, his eyes will open and that he will actually listen to the people. And I think Republicans are actually saying that they can actually work with this guy. So I think the con is when the chief of police or the county sheriff or even lawmakers, they push politics into the police force, into law enforcement. That's where it gets very seedy. That's where it gets kind of hairy. And again, not allowing like ICE agents or Border Patrol agents to actually do their jobs. That's a problem too. That's where government is coming in and not stopping the crime. And that needs to stop. And that obviously has to do with change of leadership also. If we have different change of leadership, better change of leadership that supports our law enforcement, that will help so that we are combating the crime.
I love both of your styles of answers there because it all mingles into one. That's true. And, when you talk about, and I say this in speeches and things of that, I even talked about on this show, the political organizations, and of course on this show we call it the left. Those are the people who are fighting against law enforcement, defunding the police, or at least talking about defunding. But what we always got to remember is they're using us as a political pun, the law enforcement community, to keep the nation divided as it pertains to race. I was speaking to someone the other day about that, and I'm holding true to it. I'm not going to stop talking about it. We are the huge division that helps divide. Why is that? I said that on our Brexit talk show when I was in Arizona about 2 weeks ago. What happens is you find out that at the end of the day, the only way to keep the black community, my community, with the racial narrative and the fire fueling is to say that a white person's racist. Well, on the average day, they don't encounter that. But what they can equate to it is a white cop trying to beat up on an unarmed black person or stopping the black person. I even been called racist by my own race. So they use this profession because that's the only thing really left to say racism still exists. It used to be back in the day, they say, well, the white man's keeping me down from progressing in my jobs. Now we see a lot of black successful people, obviously. Of course, in our sports, we see it. So they can't use, even though Colin Kaepernick still tried to say it, right? But the law enforcement community is the only one that kind of keeps that narrative going. And it's not that we're keeping it going. The political folks, our House of Reps and our senators, some of those people on the left, they're keeping this. Of course, local government, they're keeping the race fueled. If you don't believe me, every time an officer involved shooting happens where a white officer shoots a black person, they're always going to say there was some injustice there. And it's always a negative outlook. But what we have to remember is this profession is made up of mostly white men. I talk about it all the time. We got to dispel the myths, and we got to talk about the elephant in the room. Law enforcement has always been held by predominantly, of course, male and white men. So what do you think is going to happen most times? A white male is probably going to encounter a minority quicker than a black officer will on a regular basis because there's more of them than us, right? And women as well. There's more men than women in law enforcement community. So sorry to go on a tantrum, but we have to mention that because those are some of the cons. And it's not that the law enforcement community, we're trying to get past the racial divide, but we can't do it because we keep hearing it. And of course, something that you keep hearing in the media, and of course, believe it or not, well, you probably do believe this. A lot of parents, black parents, are teaching their kids, okay, we got to have the talk with you. It's not the sex talk. It's the talk when you're going to encounter the police. What should you do? Well, in my opinion, what should you do is be what you've always been, an upstanding young person. If you're following the rules and your parents are training you right, you don't need to talk. You just need to go out there and say, listen to what the police tell you to do. First of all, don't break any laws, okay? Speeding is one that we all probably have had issues with, but when a cop encounters you, the parents should be teaching them on what to do. Don't say anything out of the way. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. But they don't teach that. They teach keep your hands on the steering wheel, look straight ahead, don't answer any questions, call me, stuff like that. And so that becomes an issue. Those are our cons that we have in law enforcement. But pros definitely, in my opinion, outweigh the cons. So we won't beat that horse, but I appreciate y'all's stance on that. We'll move on because I'll go on a tantrum with that. You as an individual and strong women, what would you say about police officers today in the climate? You sort of answered it, but what would you say about the police? Would you even consider being a police officer in today's climate?
Antoine, that is a tough question. I
love tough questions.
Having served, I miss it. I do. I miss it every day. If I could go right back and do what I was doing, absolutely. Especially the Monday through Friday detective job. I like that, especially with the kids at home. But right now, being a mom, I have to consider my children. I have to consider whether or not I'm going to be able to make it home at the end of my shift. Like you mentioned, the narrative against law enforcement is just so negative right now, and it has been for years.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, and then also that the pay that we discussed. Officers are not being properly compensated for the job that they do. They're oftentimes working long shifts, swing shifts, overtime. They're putting themselves in dangerous situations every day. They never know what they're going to encounter. And they may ultimately make that final sacrifice for everybody. And you're going to pay our officers $40,000, $50,000 to start with. I mean, to me, that's just unreasonable, especially in today's economy. It's tough enough. And if you want those quality people, those people who really have that desire to serve, who really want to do it because they love it, but also need to know that they're being compensated and can support their families, we need to drive to raise the salaries for our police officers or deputies or troopers.
Agreed. Some countries like Dubai, I got a buddy from Dubai, and he told me that the public servants workers actually make more than your folks that we see in America, like your medical doctors, professionals in the IT world. They make less than the first responders because they believe in putting the first responders first, because at the end of the day, without these folks, they won't be where they are, of course. So they do it the opposite. They pay them very well. And so, which is why we saw those contracted jobs, at one point, maybe they were hiring people to go overseas, using the Middle Eastern countries to train the police officers, to get them trained, because they just believe in paying for good service. So there you go. Levine.
I agree with Lindsay. It's a tough question to answer. I think, in my opinion, it depends on what state you reside in. Like, I'm in Maryland. Personally, I would not become a law enforcement officer right now in Maryland because of the way that we don't have the support from our government here. We don't have support from a lot of the legislators here. And I hate to say, a lot of constituents do not support law enforcement here. It depends where you live. If you live in Montgomery County, which is where I am, or if you live in Baltimore City or Baltimore County. And we have a governor here. He was elected, Governor Westmore in Maryland. He just passed SB 1 into law, which actually takes away your Second Amendment rights. So, and he's actually being sued by the NRA into law. So what it does is it takes away a person's right to carry, and you can't transport a firearm to your neighbor's property or be on your neighbor's property with your firearm that you have a concealed carry permit, by the way, without your neighbor's permission. So that's ridiculous. And most business owners in Maryland have concealed carry. With this bill, that doesn't mean anything. It's like your Second Amendment is completely ripped away from you. It doesn't matter that you have a concealed carry permit. You have to get special permission from the government to want to use your firearm. It's insane and disgusting. So why would anybody want to be an officer here? If you're not protected, if you're not supported, if you can't even practice your Second Amendment rights, why would you be here? Why would you be an officer? It's insane. And also, as Lindsay said, the income is very bad. That's why my governor, Ron DeSantis, he offered officers that live in New York City and live in Maryland, that he offered them to come down to Florida. He said, I'll double your salary down here. He's like,
yes, he did.
Here. We will support you down here. If I was in Florida, I'd probably want to be an officer down in Florida because I know I'm protected. Governor Ron DeSantis is going to sign into law that you don't actually have to have a permit to carry. He's going to sign, Florida's going to be the 26th state in the nation to have constitutional carry. So more people, that's going to entice more people to move down to Florida. Texas has very good gun laws. They have constitutional carry. They have open carry. So it's on the state that you live in. It really does. But here in Maryland, it's very, very bad. And the crime in Baltimore County and Baltimore City, it's worse every single day. There's always a crime in Towson, which used to be a beautiful area. The mall is atrocious. There's always a shooting there. There's always a stabbing there.
Wow.
It's really bad. Areas that Lindsay used to live in are not the same. It's gotten really bad in Maryland, and unfortunately, it's going to get worse. The mayor, Brandon Scott here, he has called for the defunding of the police before he ran for mayor. Currently, is mayor, and the thing is, and I know we're going to that next question, is that this man calls for defunding of police, but yet he has police protection that protects him on a 24/7 basis. That's the irony of the whole thing.
That is a true irony. You know, you women just keep striking some great talking points. And so, of course, I go on a small tangent. So please allow me the small one. Yes, that is a big issue that we talk about, even when you look at the state capitol police. You know, they are, well, I should say the U.S. State Capitol Police. They are in charge of protecting the House of Representatives, the senators. But yet, though, those people in the chamber on the left were saying defund the police, but they never defunded their personal private security from the U.S. Capitol, and then also the people that they hired to protect them when the Capitol's not around. Isn't that amazing? Of course, we knew that Nancy Pelosi had U.S. Capitol Police guarding her home, even though the madman still was able to make entry in there. But at the end of the day, it's weak. But they tell us that we shouldn't have protection or with guns. We shouldn't do these things, but yet they have it. And that's what I always talked about. I'm sure you women have said it too. It is what we call do as I say, not as I do. Or do, right? Did I say that right? And so that is what they are doing. And you can't do it. But it's amazing, you know, your northern states are the states where the issues with gun laws are always so strong and tight. And also happens to be the areas where, guess what? The most crime exists. Imagine that. You know, you would think, what is our solution? It's very easy. It doesn't take a Albert Einstein council member or commissioner or a mayor to figure out what the issue is. New York. And it's amazing to me that you have, which I knew he wasn't going to, I didn't put a whole lot of stock in Mayor Eric Adams. because I've seen it with officers who retire from the force and then they go straight politician on you and they forget they were a cop. He hasn't done anything to uplift the police department. He has a duty and he hasn't done it. He should have solutions. He sat up there on national TV. I'm sorry, I'll shut up after this. And he made a comment about, of course, a racial division deal that he beat those crackers every day, and being the best. But yet, if a person say the same thing to him or about him or anyone else, it is a racial slur, but nobody else had anything to say about it. But I bring it up to say he's so focused on race instead of trying to figure out how can we better keep our community safe. I have to go to New York next month, and I'm like, man, we're going to be a group of us, a big group, but still always safe on subways, always safe in those areas. And I'm going to be very vulnerable because I'm not going to have my firearm with me. But at the end of the day, there's so many stories we can talk about, but we'll go on. But it's amazing to me the high crime or in the areas where in states where they said we can't have our First Amendment, Second Amendment rights. And for you, Levine, what you stated is just downright disgusting, what they're trying to do. Lindsay, I don't think they're going to be able to do it here in North Carolina. We will never allow that.
I hope not. It sounds worse than when I lived up there. I remember how difficult it was just to get a permit to carry up in Maryland. And now it's still just going downhill.
Get a permit up here in Maryland. Forget it.
Right.
You won't get it.
Terrible.
But who don't have permits, but they do have the firearms, our thugs, our gang members. Those are the folks who do have the guns. So they don't want us to be protected.
Correct.
Right. The criminals can get the guns.
Criminals.
But law-abiding citizens, not so easily. No. Not
so easily. It's amazing. But we'll move on. I love it. We can stay on that topic right there all day. But why do you think the profession as a whole has lost respect? And I'm talking about respect from and confidence from our communities. Of course, the elephant in the room is our Black impoverished areas. So I'm going to break it down. Black areas, the impoverished areas, that could be trailer park, it can be anything. But we see that in the, as we call it, the hood areas of our cities. Every state and city has a hood, right? Every state and county has a area where there's rundown trailers, a lot of drinking and crime going on. So we have to look at both sides of that. Predominantly, we know if we're looking at race, predominantly white and Hispanic lives in trailer parks, at least in our state and definitely in our county of Wake here. But there are also Black people. What I'm saying, we're going to find more of our Black minority people that are living in projects in the hood. They prefer to be amongst the people, at least have some type of civilization going on. But why do you think the communities have lost respect for the community of policing? What is it? And the confidence, or should I say the lack thereof of confidence? And I'll let anyone take this question first.
I would say it's the media's narrative. As you know, 3+ years ago, they really started pushing, law enforcement is the bad guy. Law enforcement is evil. You can't trust them. We need to get rid of them. You'll be safer without law enforcement. And it has just been going and going and going for years. Like, it has tapered off a bit. But not completely. There's people who watch the media every day and believe everything that they're hearing are also believing that, well, maybe we don't need law enforcement. Maybe we can do mental health programs instead of law enforcement. Maybe not as extreme as just getting rid of police altogether, but like I said, maybe reallocating some of the funds that go into law enforcement agencies and putting it into other services such as mental health services. But at the end of the day, when somebody is breaking in to your house, who do you call? Who do you want to be there? If we're defunding the police, we're limiting how many people are on the force. We're stretching them thin. And then it's putting not only our officers in danger, but our citizens in danger.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it also has to do with the narrative of what we said, the defunding the police, that whole we need to defund. And you constantly say that. And then people don't want to put their investment into the police. And like I said earlier, I've been a big proponent of having religious institutions have more law enforcement and more protection. And I call synagogues that have been vandalized or they've had anti-Semitic attacks. And I'm like, well, where's the law enforcement? Like, what's going on? And they said, well, it's going to cost a lot of money to have 24/7 security. And I'm like, so you fundraise, you put your heart into something that you need money for. If you're having anti-Semitic attacks, if you're having attacks at your church, and you need more law enforcement, then that's where the revenue needs to go into. That's where the money needs to go into. But putting your money into something else that may or may not be lucrative for your synagogue or your church is asinine to me. I think there's a lot of waste in a lot of these institutions. I think they need to put the money in law enforcement or put their money into things that will save the community, will save their congregants. Nobody wants to go to a synagogue or a church where they feel unsafe. And if people are saying, I don't really feel comfortable going to synagogue or church or going to a mosque because it's unsafe, then this is the time where your federation or your synagogue, your men's club or your sisterhood, they gather together and they put the funds together. They get donors, they get certain sponsors to donate and sponsor so that they have enough money to have 24/7 security at these religious institutions. There's no excuse why there shouldn't be 24/7 security at these religious institutions.
I totally agree. When you look at churches nowadays, I go to a very large church in Raleigh, North Carolina. We've always had some of them made up of police officers, one or two had a military. He's still there, military soldier. You had a guy who worked in the security field. This was back in the early or late 90s. I joined, my parents and I joined in the late 90s. And I remember seeing these guys with the Secret Service earpiece type deal. Of course, a lot of churches criticized us. They said, look at this, a pastor needs security. It wasn't necessarily for him, even though he was speaking out against Islamic beliefs and things. He had some death threats. That wasn't only for him. It was for the congregants. And I'm going to tell you what, you fast forward to 2023, most every church you go in has security. It's sad we have to do that, but there's people in there you don't even know about who are armed in the church, sitting in there enjoying the service because we saw what happened in South Carolina, and the list goes on and on. So you need that protection. And you're right. Wherever the need is most, you should put your interest in that. Being a former Wake County Sheriff's deputy, one of our major off-duty contracts was working with churches, and they still have a lot of them because churches realize, I know it's going to cost a penny when you add it all up, but what's the cost of saving one life? So, and I know folks who stated to me that they will pay whatever it takes. Some churches have more than one deputy. I've worked in churches where I was the only one, worked in churches where they had two. Some churches have three. It just depends on how large it is, what kind of money they're taking in, right? So I appreciate that. But when you look at it, the community has lost respect, like you said, Lindsay, from the media, lost respect as it pertains to the communities, and people are not willing to, at the end of the day, admit that there is a problem on both sides. I would say law enforcement and the community. We have a trust barrier, probably always had one. We're trying to rebuild that. And of course, you have a wonderful program that you're a part of, Levine lead. Of course, there's DARE still around. I'm actually a certified DARE instructor, and they've actually revamped that program. Good. Yeah, they did. They put a lot of more bullying emphasis on what we have going on in America, of course, in the schools. And of course, they still have the drug resistant things like that. But yeah, those things are all important. So that's also a part of us trying to build the gap, bridge the gap, and build a community back up, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can have all these programs, but if the community's not coming to them, I mean, what else do they want law enforcement to do? I mean, we'll even pick up the kids, which we do a lot of programs, but then what do? We need some buy-in from the community too. So it's a two-way street, not a one-way street. Talk about it. I'll move on. What does defunding the police mean to you? And I know we touched on it very brief, so we'll keep it short on this and then move on. But what does defunding the police mean to you, Lindsay? We've heard this phrase, but what does it really mean deep down inside?
Deep down, I think stretching our resources thin if they're not already trying to get rid of our resources completely. Like you said, some people argue we want more community policing in our communities, right? We don't want the cops to just go and write tickets and get the bad guys. We want them to really get to know the community. And you want this extra effort, but you're not willing to fund what is necessary to put these extra officers out there that can really be the boots on the ground to get to know the community, to help rebuild trust. But yeah, I mean, to me, really, it's just stretching resources thin, stretching our officers thin, making it so response times are longer. And then the officers who are actually working already just, completely worn out because they're having to cover so much ground with less partners on the street.
And we see that here in our local city. Raleigh, we're going to just call the elephant out. Raleigh's lost a lot of good cops. Some of them had about 3 years more or more, and they decided they couldn't do it no more. Not saying that City of Raleigh to fund it completely, but they were talking about it at one point, at the height of COVID and George Floyd. But they saw what happened. A lot of people left. They said, if you don't want to support us, even when it came to the mask mandates and the COVID-19 shots, they said, we'll go somewhere else where they're not mandating this stuff. And they lost a lot of good experience. And like you said, a lot of good officers, Lindsay. So I do agree. Miss Alexandra, what do you think defunding the police? Well, what does that mean to you?
I mean, honestly, I think it goes back to I would say the politics of it, because this was a very political thing. That's how it got started. It became this political thing. It became political. And that's where the whole thing just went downhill from there. And by the lawmakers, the certain lawmakers that supported this concept of defunding the police, how they wanted to get rid of the rule of law, how they wanted to not uphold the Constitution, how they wanted to make up their own rules with the Constitution. I mean, we have DAs in New York, we have DAs in Massachusetts that are making up their own rules. And some of them graduated from some very high-end law schools, but they're making up their own rules. Yeah. So I feel that defunding the police really was kind of, I guess you could say, changing the psychological mind of the young person to be like, you don't need this protection. We don't need to have the Second Amendment. We don't need to follow the Constitution. We don't need to follow the rule of law. You need to take the law into your own hands. You need to come up with your own interpretation of what the Constitution would be and your own interpretation what the Second Amendment would be. And I see that with a lot of young people now that go to Georgetown Law School or George Washington Law School. Now there's like different interpretations of the Constitution. There's different interpretations of the Bill of Rights. No, it is what it is. You can't misinterpret it. But this was a way to kind of say, you need to form your own theory and your own thinking of it. And if you don't like the police, if you don't like what they do, if you don't like holding a gun, and you hate people that do, good. You can combat that. You can say, I don't like you because you're holding a gun. You're a monster. I don't like you because you're protecting me. And it was like a psychological damaging thing that a lot of these lawmakers did to a lot of young people, which is really sad. And that's why we had all those BLM rallies, during the summer that were George Soros funded, because that's what George Soros is all about. That's what socialism is all about, making everybody conform to this one concept. And it's not the right concept. And what he's doing is he's taking away the rule of law and making the young people form their own rule of law. Does that make sense?
That makes a whole lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Like I said, you two are just thrown out.
I went into the philosophical.
No, but you know what? It is very much needed on both ends. That's why I say you and Lindsay have a tag team duo going on here, because what you got is the best of both worlds. Lindsay lays it out straight, and then you come over here with this methodical political stuff, because when it comes to the Back to Blue NC, they hold that line right in the middle. They just there to support the police. So Lindsay's not going to talk much on that. However, we have Levine who can. And of course myself, but you're right. And we have to, like I said, we're not making it up. It's the truth of what you said. Now, if the right was doing this, we would call them out as well. But the right is saying, let's support the police. Let's add more funding to the police. Let's get this where we need to be. Because at the end of the day, we all need protection, right? What does the police? Go ahead,
Lindsay. I just wanted to throw something in there.
Please.
with the narrative and politics and everything is, at the end of the day, supporting the police should not be a political factor whatsoever.
I agree.
It should not be left or right, Democrat or Republican or anything in between.
Amen.
It should just be an American thing.
Amen.
Should be an American thing. And you're right. Amen. You are 100% right. And it's amazing that they were able to even bring this into the fold. And so what does defund the police mean to me? It to me is just a wonderful and fancy phrase that they came up with that people bought into, because when you look at it and you close your eyes, it sounds great. Defund the police. D, anything with D attached to it means you want to, you anti, right? So at the end of the day, it sounded great, and people just jumped on this bandwagon. Defund the police, defund the police, defund the police. We can think of many things to defund. And Lindsay, you probably recall when I wore my shirt that said defund Congress. We can defund Congress. Let's do that. We can defund McDonald's. We can do a lot of different things.
Right.
But it's just a talking point that they use, that they sold. But you do realize, and you see, I put that question there strategically, but you do hear, or you do see that we're not hearing that as often as we used to, because they realized that was not the right thing.
Yeah, it's not popular anymore.
Right.
Because we can, if you really get down to the heart of it, if they want us to have a day of purge, we can do that, and we can see, and we already know what's going to happen if all the police back away. And we'll even include our firefighters and EMS. Don't go to any calls. Of course, if the elderly person's in danger, or people having natural issues. But at the end of the day, when these riders are taking over the streets, fighting and killing each other, let them have at it. We'll do a day of purge. We'll lock ourselves in our homes and protect us, and let's see how far that gets us. Right? We know it won't get us far.
We need law and order.
We need law and order. And I talk about this all the time. God established law and order. He demanded it, but he said in order for us to coexist, we had to have it. And so he created it. If God created it, we know that it can never be taken away, right? Mm-hmm. So do you believe that the sitting president of the United States, so currently we have Joe Biden, and I'm not talking to throwing any shade at Joe. It can be anyone in that seat as a sitting United States president. Do you believe they have an obligation to make sure that they are supporting and uplifting the police and getting the communities to uplift and support the police? Do you believe that is a job that the president, he or she, should be upholding?
Yes, absolutely. 100%. The president, whoever is sitting in that position at the time, is our leader and needs to lead the people to the right example of supporting those who defend and protect us in our nation. So yes, absolutely. Anybody in office should be supporting our police and directing the public to do so as well. Yeah.
I love it.
I agree with Lindsay 100%. And police are voters. They are voters too. They are people. They vote for you. And a lot of Second Amendment people that are very 2A, they will vote for a person that supports them. And that's the biggest thing. And you need 2A voters. You really need those 2A voters. And not just in presidential races, but in gubernatorial races as well, Senate races and congressional races.
Agreed. We need them all over. And like you said, police officers of all walks of life, we also vote as well. We want the same rights as our civilians, because at the end of the day, when we take our uniform off, we are back to being a civilian ourselves, right? And so I also believe that too. Obviously, I put that question there for a reason. I do believe that, of course, President 45 pushed us all the way, and I witnessed it in person when Blexit was invited to the White House by himself, invited us to come and be a part, to march on the BLM mural, just to counteract what they were saying about the police. Of course, that was during the height of the riots. He wanted us to go out there as a strong minority group and show presence that we do support the police, because yes, we could have gotten we could have got Turning Point USA, which is made up predominantly of white people, to go, but it wouldn't have made that same statement that we needed to make, because it was during the time of George Floyd and people saying white police officers are bad. So what do? You get the same race of people who on the good side, who are spouting on the bad side, and you put the good guys over there and march We wasn't paid to do it, of course. So we had a wonderful hat that we couldn't even wear yet. It was because we didn't want to be politicized that way. But we went there because we believed in law enforcement. Many were law enforcement officers like myself, but many just support and honor law enforcement because they understand the real meaning behind what law enforcement should do. Is all law enforcement officers great and doing their job well? No, they are not. But I would even put a number on it. Are 99% of the law enforcement officers going out every day, putting the uniform on and trying to make some good, whatever that may be. It can be, taking someone to get gas who ran out of gas, from that small of an event to, like you said, Levine, saving a child or a cat from a tree, right? So all these things we do. And I always say this too. Law enforcement is something that I believe, I've been doing it for 14 years going up on now. And I always say this. I told my chief one day, he laughed and he said, I do agree with you. Law enforcement, we have this big box, right? And I'm going to give you an example. You might and you may not agree. Big box. And when it doesn't fit in the box, talking about a civilian, you know who they give it to? They say, give it to the cops. Give you an example. Snake in my kitchen. Who's going to do that? Really, wildlife should go to that, or exterminator, someone deals with that, rodent. Nope, call police. They're going to do it, and they're going to do it for free. My keys are locked in my door. Call the police. My neighbor won't act up. My neighbor won't talk to me. He gave me the finger. That's not a police issue, but they say, you know what, police, protecting and serving. No matter, my kid won't go to school.
I was just about to say, I've had that before. My kid won't go to school.
We had that one happen, Lindsay. Yeah. Call the police. Oh, I got another one for you. They won't give my money back at the restaurant, even though I ate one plate of the Chinese buffet food. Call the police. Everything just, if it don't fit, give it to the police.
Yeah, yep, everything.
But yeah, and don't forget, ladies, social worker. But yeah, they tell us they needed to fund us. And I'm not saying we're perfect. Again, I'm going to throw it out there so I want everybody to know we're not being biased. We understand our faults, our errors. But at the end of the day, you want us to do all this, but yet you still say to fund the police. Can't work. As they say, what they say, you can't have your cake and eat it too. We're going to be wrapping up here shortly, ladies. I don't want to take a lot of your time here. I'm actually going to have to hit record on another replay for the Listen Only podcast. So everybody can hear that going. We actually missed a few minutes there, but we are still going live here on YouTube and Facebook. But listen, we're getting ready to wrap up. And so we know that our president should be helping support law enforcement. Can't really say he's doing that right now. Again, we're not going to throw shade because it's not about Joe tonight. Maybe another show will be about Joe. Lindsay, I want to share this opportunity with you because your organization played a huge role, and it's going to get somber for just a moment, but your organization played a huge role in the efforts, and of course the men and women as well, when we lost our dear brother and friend, Deputy Ned Burr, who I knew personally, you knew personally, Lindsay, from the Wake County Sheriff's Office, who was brutally murdered at the hands of an illegal immigrant who, when they arrested him, he smiled to the camera. And he recently escaped from prison. But thanks be to God, they got him back. But we won't even go. That's a whole nother topic, whole nother episode. But back
that'd be a whole nother show.
Oh my gosh, isn't it?
Yes.
Back to Blue was there, y'all, every step of the way. He was a canine handler, Levine, and he lost his life doing something that he always loved. Even to the fact of him dying, he stopped to help what he thought to be a stranded motorist. Right. And I know that road that he was killed on very well because where he was headed was our training center. I worked there for a few years, but it was a dark road late at night, and these guys knew they had the upper hand on him, and they knew they probably would get away due to the rain and due to the time of morning that it was, right? But Lindsay, the reason why I brought it up because your organization played a role in that. And so if you just want to tell the listeners very briefly, because we have one more to talk about after that, played a role in the funeral with the family. You did a lot of media interviews. It wasn't to shed light on your organization and to make y'all look good. Y'all genuinely was the mouthpiece for the family when they weren't able to speak. And we want to say thank you for that. That's just one of the many things that y'all do at Back to Blue. But share with the listeners just really quick on some of the things that y'all did to make sure Ned Bird's family was at least shed in a good light, because the former sheriff did not do that for us.
Right. So, just a little bit of a quick backstory for our listeners. We are a nonprofit organization that assists the children and families of officers killed in the line of duty here in North Carolina. And we are just now coming up on 3 years old. We've already raised $1 million to help assist these families here in North Carolina. But it's not just about raising money and writing a check. It's really about connecting with the departments and the families when they lose their loved one, attending the funerals, attending the memorial services, really walking hand in hand with the family members and making sure they're okay, and seeing if there are any other needs we can tend to besides just financially assisting them. And so when we lost Ned of Wake County Sheriff's Office, it was such a huge shock, because like you said, he stopped to help what he probably thought was a stranded motorist on his way to the training center just to see if they needed a hand. And he got shot in the back of the head for what? By these illegal immigrants. And his death was just such a shock and a tragedy to not only the county, but the state. And the unfortunate part was, at the time, they had a sheriff who was not very supportive, for lack of better terms. He tried to show remorse, but it was false, if that makes sense, Antoine. And so what we did was we really touched base with his family, and he didn't have a wife, he didn't have children, but he had his sister and he had his uncle. His parents were already deceased. And typically, like I said, we raise money for these families, but Ned was so great and his family was so great that his sister said, "We don't want the money. We want you to use it towards something better." And so my idea was, how about we establish a scholarship in Ned's name, because he had worked so hard to get into law enforcement.
He did.
He tried 8 times?
Yeah,
just to make it through the police academy?
He did indeed.
Worked so hard to get there. And I'm getting upset and you're getting upset, because I know all this from his sister. He worked so hard to get there, and he was so avid in jiu-jitsu and defense, martial arts, and he was all about training the next generation, which is what everybody told me. He had a huge heart. So what we have been able to do is establish a scholarship in his name at Wake Tech. And so what we're going to do is we're going to find a candidate that embodies the spirit and the passion of Ned, who also has financial need, who may otherwise not be able to put themselves through the academy, and push them through in his honor. So that's just one of the ways we're able to honor Ned.
That's such a wonderful thing to do. That is amazing. That's such a good, that touches my heart. That's so sweet. That is fabulous.
And these are the things that the Back to Blue NC is doing, what Alexandra Levine's organization is doing, which at some point we look forward to talking more about it. But I will say this, we got to give a shout out to 2 men. We have to give a shout out to Sheriff Donnie Harrison, who actually hired Ned and also gave the opportunity to become a deputy. Ned Bird, Deputy Ned Bird had some disabilities. He had one good eye, and I don't think he could even see out of the right eye or the left, whichever one it was. But everybody,
yeah, he had a glass eye, right?
Yeah, he had a glass eye.
Yeah,
and we know in law enforcement that brings up a few issues as far as when it comes to shooting, things like that. But Sheriff Donnie took a chance, because, like Lindsay said, he always wanted to do that, and Sheriff's heart is so big that he allowed that. We also want to give a shout out to the current sheriff, Sheriff Willie Rowe, because he helped as a new sheriff. He could have said, we're not going to remember that legacy, but he continues to allow that legacy to live on. I know y'all did some stuff with him recently to honor Ned, and so I give a shout out to both sheriffs. That's what you should do, leaving your party aside, no matter what political side you're on. like you said, Lindsay, earlier, you do it because it's right, because it's law enforcement. We appreciate you. And I want to talk about one more. We're wrapping up here, but I want to talk about one more great deed. I would call it a deed. And the honor, I'm sure it was for y'all to do this. We saw that a mass shooter entered where that shooter did live in that community, I believe, entered a community, Alexandria, on, was it last year now? Time flies by us. Did that happen last year over there in off of New Hope? I can't even think of the subdivision, the golf community, where the young man went in and killed multiple people. Officer Torres was obviously a victim of that.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to Alexandra.
No,
Yeah, you're
I'm
talking
sorry.
Yeah, I
about
thought you were too. I'm like, what?
the
What are you
heading.
talking
I
about?
apologize. See, I'm confusing you all. I'm trying to give Alexandra the story, so I'm using her name because
Right.
Lindsay and I already know, but I apologize. I'll just tell the story and leave Alexandra's name out of it
Okay.
because I don't want anybody to be confused here. But we saw that a young man, teenage age, went into a community and went on a mass shooting spree, killed several people, killed a city of Raleigh police officer who was on his way to prepare for his tour of duty. Fairly new. I believe he had less than 3 years. And he was murdered, shot. And so, Lindsay, your organization, first of all, surrounded yourselves around his wife. He left back a newborn or infant child, beautiful little girl. And you and your team were surrounding her every time they were doing a media interview. It wasn't for y'all, again, to get on TV. Y'all were surrounding his wife with love. And you could feel the love. And I don't think she could have done it without the help of the Lord and y'all, and of course the family that she has back home. Probably, I think all her family's in New York, but you all really centered around that. And then just briefly talk about that bill that y'all were able to help along with the PBA. I think the PBA did some sponsoring that bill, not 100%. Me being
Right.
a PBA member, but go ahead, take the floor.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Jasmine Torres, the wife of Officer Gabriel Torres, she is such a sweetheart. She is so strong. And yes, she has a beautiful 2-year-old daughter that she's raising. And like you said, we tried to help surround her with that support and that love during the most difficult time of her life. We got to know her and her beautiful girl very quickly. And but it's not just us, it's the whole police department of Raleigh, it's the whole community. Her family up in New Jersey and her husband's family up there as well. Is really a cumulative effort, and you can see just how much love and support there is in the Blue family. So I'm very grateful for that, for her and for her daughter, her young daughter. That's the saddest part to me. But the Gabe Torres Act, I can't take any credit for that because it wasn't something that we thought up of or pushed to have moved, but it was definitely something we questioned at the beginning. When we talked to the chief and the media, is this going to be considered a line of duty death or not? And it was taking forever to find out. Not only for Jasmine's sake, but because we had nominated her with Tunnel to Towers to get her a mortgage-free home. And they wanted to know too, is this officially a line of duty death or not? They need to know to present it to the board and get approved. Thankfully, they went ahead and approved it and she got her new home. So grateful for that. But the reason this act came about is because it's so up in the air. Like, is an officer who's on his way to work, but not in their patrol car, are they technically considered on duty? Or what about on the way back? Because not every officer brings home their patrol vehicle, as you know. But in his mind, he's in work mode. He's ready to go. He's ready to report to duty. And an officer is never truly off duty. And the other wonderful thing about this bill is if it gets passed, it will backdate it to January 1st of 2022 and include every other first responder who lost their life either en route to or en route from training or the line of duty. And it will help not only Jasmine, but last time I checked, at least 16 other first responders here in North Carolina.
That's awesome.
So we're really hoping it gets passed. It has been going smoothly. It is a bipartisan effort, which is a wonderful thing, a good sign, hopefully, of things to come in the future, bipartisan efforts and supporting law enforcement.
I love it because number one, you said bipartisan, but when you look at that, there's always been the question whether the officer died in the line of duty or was it a duty related death, right? Those are the two questions definitely the feds want to know before they write that big check. But it's sad that they get down to the nitty gritty, has to get down to that level. But you're right. Many of us, the current agency where I work, I actually don't even drive a police car home anymore now. So typically today I actually have my uniform on for the most part. Most of my stuff I left in the locker, but I normally dress out completely. Since I'm not in a police car, I believe I shouldn't be wearing a police uniform, but you're so vulnerable. But I decided to do it today. So, but anyways, when you look at that, you're right. Is an officer really off duty whenever they're not on duty? And that question's always going to be asked. A lot of gray areas in there. Obviously, for sure, if you're in your patrol car and you are still in that jurisdiction where you work, you're definitely not off duty till you get out of that patrol car and get home. But I will say this. If that bill has a chance of not passing, meaning, or I should say, being signed by both chambers and getting to the governor's desk, and if he thinks for 1 minute that he's going to veto it, first of all, he won't be able to. We have supermajority now. We're going to always overturn every bill that he vetoes. But I don't foresee him, even though he put a little handcuffs on law enforcement during the House bill. I can't even think of the number now, but it talks about the Police Accountability Act. I don't foresee him not signing this bill. I think he'll get a lot of pushback. And like you said, it's bipartisan. But who knows? But even if he does, we'll be able to override it. But it's a wonderful thing.
It is. And I don't see how he could turn it down. I mean, it's not about law enforcement, whether you support them or not. It's about all first responders and it's about their loved ones they leave behind that need the support. So
that need the support. Now, who made the wonderful little Build-A-Bear? Was that y'all had something to do with that for the little daughter? I saw that all over the media.
Oh,
the little police Build-A-Bear.
Probably Blue Line Bears.
Okay. Nice.
The uniforms of fallen officers or first responders, and they make a stuffed bear out of them.
Hey, guess what? We need to get them on the show. We got to get them on the show, Lindsay. Let's connect them up, and we all can get back on. And by that time, hopefully, Levine, you'll be able to shed more light about your organization. Let's get that wonderful. I want to promote that company for sure. That'll be awesome. I think many people will want to support that for sure. But, Officer Torres left behind a beautiful young lady. I know she's going to do great things, and we're praying for the wife of Torres, as they say, the widow of Torres, Officer Torres. We allow him to rest in peace, and to my brother Ned Bird, rest in peace, and also to the family of the Birds. We're praying for you because all this is still new. So, and the Wake County Sheriff's Office, still praying for the K-9 brothers. Every last person on the K-9 unit I knew personally, had a relationship with, some more than others. But let me tell you, that took a toll not only on them, took a toll on me. I had trouble sleeping some nights just because of the fact I couldn't get past the fact how they brutally murdered this wonderful man. But needless to say, we're going to end on not a sober note, but I want to say also we're praying for the city of Raleigh Police and every police agency around this country who has experienced loss. But again, today's show is dedicated to all law enforcement officers nationally, as we do support National Police Officers Week. To me, every day is Police Officers Day. But we do thank you two wonderful women for being on this show. And as we close out, I want to give you all an opportunity to just tell the listeners where they can find and locate your organizations and your personal platforms, and anything you want to plug in these last few moments. The floor is going to be yours. I will start with Alexandra Levine, and then Lindsay will end with you. Then I'll come back and we'll all go home. Wait, we're already home. But we'll do. Levine, take it away.
Yeah, so you can always follow me on Facebook, Alexandra Levine. My Twitter is at Alexandra Levi20. If you want to know more about the organizations, the first organization is webackblue.com. That's webackblue.com. And then we have lead.org, LEAD.org.
Wonderful. Lindsay, your turn.
Okay. So Back to Blue NC, we can be found online at backtobluenc.org. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search up Back to Blue NC Incorporated. We also have a group, Back to Blue NC, on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Truth, LinkedIn, all at the same tag at Back to Blue NC.
I love it. I'm a member of Back to Blue NC. Guess what, Alexandra? You can be a member of Back to Blue NC. And
Yeah.
Lindsay always approves and allows me to submit my different podcast shows only if they're not controversial and political. I learned the hard way. Because listen, it's not personal, it's business. I love you, brother, but denied. But I will say this.
Right. Well, as a nonprofit, you know.
As a nut, we want to keep that, 501c3 status. I don't want anything to ever jeopardize that. Hey, I almost forgot. I got to give a shout out to my organization, Blexit. Okay. Wonderful people, Candace Owens, Officer Brandon Tatum, and my brother, Pierre Wilson. Okay. This month here, every year in May is Back to Blue. So we're doing all things Back to Blue. And we have some great events coming up in Back to Blue. I oversee the South Central region. New Mexico is having a great Back to Blue event that I'm going to put on my Facebook page. Guess what? Missouri's doing a great one. Texas, all these places. Of course, New York is doing great things and all around the country. But I was biased to the people that I work with on a daily basis in the South Central region. But anyways, Back to Blue NC National Police Officers Week. And as I always end on the show, we like to say, Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be able to spread this message to many people. And I hope that you really enjoyed this show. I have had some wonderful guests with me today who have given great insight, and I really appreciate it. Today's show was again centered around women who support law enforcement. I have Lindsay LiCausi with me. I also have Alexandra Levine with me, and we have said a lot of good things. So please like, share, and continue to support Real Talk with Officer Antoine Thomas. I'm your host. Until we meet again, God bless our country. God bless, guess what, our United States Armed Forces. And of course, God continue to bless the men and women that are serving in blue. And until we meet again, we're going to say, sayonara.